It was a rainy Saturday morning in a small town just outside Portland when Ethan Carter pushed open the door to the local coffee shop. The single father had been up since dawn, making breakfast for his 7-year-old daughter, Lily, and packing her art supplies before heading into town. Money had been tight ever since his wife passed away 3 years ago, and Ethan was doing everything he could to juggle construction jobs, parenting, and keeping his daughter's little world as bright as possible. The coffee shop was his small escape, a place where he could gather his thoughts for a few minutes before running to his next shift. As he stood in line, Ethan noticed a woman sitting quietly at a corner table, dressed in a simple gray coat and jeans. She looked out of place, not because she was flashy, but because she carried herself differently. Her posture was elegant, her movements graceful, and yet she seemed to be trying hard to blend in. A moment later, a group of men at a nearby table started whispering loudly, throwing snide remarks in her direction. Their comments weren't just disrespectful, they were cruel, mocking the way she looked, as if they could tear her down to feel bigger themselves. Ethan felt something stir inside him. He had seen this before in school hallways when bullies picked on kids too shy to fight back, and he had always hated it. Without hesitation, he stepped away from the counter and walked toward the men. "Hey," he said firmly, his voice steady but low. "That's enough. You don't talk to people like that. Not here, not anywhere." The men looked up, surprised, and one of them smirked. "What? You're a bodyguard or something?" Ethan didn't flinch. "I'm a father," he replied simply. "And I wouldn't want my daughter growing up thinking this kind of behavior is normal." "So you're done." Something in his tone made them back down. They muttered under their breath, but gathered their things and left. The cafe went quiet again, the rain pattering softly against the windows. Ethan gave the woman a reassuring nod before returning to the counter. The woman watched him for a moment, her eyes warm with gratitude. After a pause, she rose and approached his table. "You didn't have to do that," she said gently. Her voice carried a subtle accent, refined yet soft. "Someone had to," Ethan answered, shrugging. They were out of line. She smiled faintly, then sat down across from him. "What's your name?" "Ethan. Ethan Carter." "I'm Isabella," she replied. She didn't add a last name, and Ethan didn't ask. To him, she was just a woman who deserved respect, no more and no less. They talked for a while, surprisingly easily. She asked about his daughter, and Ethan's face lit up as he described Lily's love for painting and her boundless imagination. Isabella listened intently, almost fascinated, as if she hadn't had a genuine conversation like this in years. When Lily returned from the restroom and joined them, Isabella's eyes softened further. The little girl chatted away, showing Isabella her sketchbook filled with colorful drawings. Isabella leaned in, praising every page with sincere admiration. For Ethan, it was nothing more than a kind encounter with a stranger. But for Isabella, it was something else entirely. Because Isabella Marquez was no ordinary woman. She was the youngest billionaire in the country, the heir to a global luxury empire. And in a life filled with people who treated her as a status symbol, Ethan had been the first man in years who saw her as just a person. Over the next few weeks, Isabella returned to that same coffee shop. Each time, she seemed to cross paths with Ethan and Lily. Sometimes she would sit with them, sometimes she would just share a smile from across the room. Ethan noticed her kindness, the way she listened, the way she never seemed bored with Lily's endless stories. Slowly, trust grew. One evening, when Ethan mentioned he was worried about affording Lily's art classes, Isabella hesitated before speaking. "What if I could help?" she asked softly. Ethan shook his head immediately. "I can't take handouts. I want to provide for my daughter myself." Isabella respected that. But quietly, behind the scenes, she arranged for the local art program to expand its scholarship fund. Lily was offered a spot without ever knowing why. Ethan only found out months later, and by then his feelings for Isabella had already begun to grow. When Isabella finally revealed who she truly was, Ethan was stunned. He couldn't believe that the woman he had defended in a coffee shop was one of the wealthiest people in America. His first reaction wasn't awe, it was doubt. He worried they came from two different worlds, that he couldn't possibly fit into hers. But Isabella looked him straight in the eye and said, "That day in the cafe, you didn't see money. You didn't see power. You saw a woman being treated unfairly, and you stood up. That's the world I want to live in. That's the world I want for Lily. And that's why I'm here." In that moment, Ethan realized that sometimes love doesn't come from what you have, but from what you're willing to give: courage, kindness, and a piece of your heart. And so, what started as a small act of courage in a rainy coffee shop grew into something neither of them expected. A love story that proved true worth isn't measured in dollars, but in character.